After having Lola Wötzel on our podcast for the second time, who also attended our book event in Shanghai, we couldn't resist inviting Jeffrey Towson, the second author of the 1 Hour China book, to the podcast as well. Jeffrey has been featured on the show before, but it's been a while and a lot has happened since then. In this episode, Damian and Thomas sit down with Jeffrey to discuss some of the most exciting developments in China's tech and business landscape. From the fierce competition in the electric vehicle industry to the way TikTok is transforming e-commerce, they cover a range of topics that provide fresh insights into how China is shaping global markets. They also dive into Jeffrey's thoughts on the rise of smart cities and what European platforms can learn from China's fast-paced digital innovation. So grab a coffee and enjoy this insightful conversation between Damian, Thomas and Jeffrey.
Made in China. Von der Werkbank der Welt zum größten Konsumentenmarkt und Technologieführer. Eine Reise durch das Leben, Business und die Kultur im Reich der Mitte mit Damian Maib und Thomas Derksen.
A very warm welcome to our Made in China podcast. We haven't had an English episode in quite some time, so I have to come into the English mode again, but I'm sure Damian will help me. And Jeffrey, luckily, speaks very, very clear English, so it's also easy for us Germans to understand. Today we have the triangle of Bangkok, Shanghai, and Yiwu. I am in Yiwu, Damian in Shanghai, and Jeffrey is in Bangkok. Welcome to our podcast, Jeffrey.
Great, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Perfect. Yeah, warm welcome also from my side. And let me dive in with a question we haven't sent you. If you were to write a book about your life, what would the title be?
Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something clever. The accurate version would be just like, adventurist analyst, right? Lots of adventures, lots of travel, but mostly just analyzing stuff all the time, right? I don't build things. I analyze and take apart. But I'd have to think up a more clever name than that. But it would be something like that.
That's good. So maybe these questions give you a little bit inspiration. In the beginning, we just do three quick questions without telling you that we have this question. So the second would be, maybe it also helps. The second would be, what is your biggest quirk or habit that makes you smile at yourself?
Well, just because I was talking about this yesterday, like whenever there's a turbulence on an airplane, I put up the tray table because somehow the idea of crashing and getting cut in half scares me. Like it makes no sense whatsoever, but literally every time there's turbulence, I put up the tray table. And I know it's idiotic and I always do it. Yeah, so it's stupid. So we could call that a quirk. I don't know if that would call that a quirk.
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, but it's funny, yeah.
I do it every time. And for some reason, crashing in the ocean scares me, but crashing into a mountain doesn't. Like, I don't know why that makes sense, but these are the things I think about when it's turbulence. Turbulence over the mountains is like, yeah, it's cool, it's fine. Ocean, oh no, I don't want to go down the ocean. You're dead either way, but yeah.
Oh, that's funny. No, that's a good one. That's a good one. If you were to create a completely new country, what would be the first rule in your constitution?
Oh, that's a good one, because that's kind of a little bit political, and I try not to be too political. I would say if you would ask me this year, I would say free speech absolutist, like 100% no exceptions under any circumstances, right? And I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago, but I've become like a complete absolutist, like any exception seems to last about a week until it's exploited from top to bottom, and it just, So yeah, but that's just kind of what I'm listening to right now. So that's probably, more reflection of this month.
Yeah, this is also an answer you could talk like a whole hour in another episode. Like we are not a political podcast, but this is a very interesting topic to talk about. Yeah.
Sorry, there is actually one thought in there that's not just quirky. Like, I do think, which is on my subject, a lot about the idea of information control, that everything's connected, everything's digital now, so it creates points of control, which we never really had before. And I think that's like a big business subject, and a big digital subject is like, because everyone wants to put their hands on the wheel, that now that the points of control never existed before, now they do, so politicians, tech gurus, business people. Everyone wants their hands on the wheel because it turns out it's a tremendous source of power, probably. I do think about that a lot as a non-political-ish business topic, which then bleeds into free speech and all that. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. So the reason why we invited you today is like you were on our podcast around 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, and also Lola, your partner in crime, business partner, and you wrote a book, the 1 Hour China book, and we were really big fans of it. Actually, Damian read this book when he started his own China business, and he said, okay, we have to invite them to our podcast. So we did. And the episodes with you and Lola were very successful. And after that, we asked you if there is a German version of your book, and you said no. So we said, okay, let's buy the copyright of the German version and publish it. And so we did 2 weeks ago. We had a very nice event in Shanghai with a lot of CEOs, general managers, and Lola was also there. You couldn't join, unfortunately, but we are very happy that we have like such a successful cooperation on that end. So you wrote the book because you thought there needs to be understanding or more understanding in the West for China business because there are so many misconceptions. What are the misconceptions or the wrong conceptions of China that differ from what you describe in the book?
Yeah, I mean, we wrote that for business people, so there's no politics in it, which the China discussions tends to get into that pretty quick. But basically it's for smart but very busy business people, right? The idea back then, which was 10 years ago almost, was look, you can't avoid China as a subject anymore in business. I mean, if you're doing hospitals in California, fine, but if you're doing anything in auto, how can you even understand the auto market anymore without being like, oh my God, look at all these EVs coming out of China this year, right? It's a big subject, but people get spooked by it because it seems foreign and different, and very smart business people start to get very hesitant, and they shouldn't. It's not that complicated once you take it apart like any industry. So that was kind of the starting point for that. But now within that topic, it doesn't make sense for everybody to think about this. Germany, Northern Italy, it is, in my opinion, a very big deal. Like, I mean, I was in Hamburg. Yeah, I was in Germany about 12 months ago dealing with some industrial companies there, auto stuff. I mean, the connections, they're only going to increase. Anything manufacturing based, anything auto, anything industrial intensive. Major brands looking for a new region to grow in. What, you're going to expand to Romania? No, you go to Asia. Now, if you're in the Middle East, there's people talk about the Middle East to China. There's actually not that much to do or going on. So it's a little specific on where you are and what industry you're in. Anyways, that was kind of the, and our sort of big preconception that we said is like, look, don't get all spooked by China. It's not that complicated. It's big and there's a lot to know, but it's no different than trying to take apart the auto sector or trying to take apart the energy markets. It's just a topic. Any smart business person can figure it out. So that's kind of where we started. Since then, maybe the thing that's changed a bit is the political aspect has gotten more prominent. Back in 2014-15, nobody was talking about Chinese politics, at least not in US elections. And now it's like a real subject. That's kind of Trump was the one who kicked that off. And I think that is probably overemphasized now. I think, if you were going to look at the US and you were going to look at auto in the US or, I don't know, Silicon Valley, you wouldn't start by saying, what does Biden think about this? That wouldn't be question number one. But you bring up anything about China, they always think, well, what does Xi Jinping think? When you're doing restaurants in Chengdu, it's not really a topic we think about, right? It's a factor, but I think it's overemphasized. The thing that always, I think people underestimate is just the pure level of competition. Like, you are going to have to innovate at hyperspeed if you're going to do well in a lot of businesses in China. So the competition and the innovation rate is so fast. That's usually what gives people trouble. It's not usually. Politics can happen, but it's usually, in my list, that's not number one. Everyone talks about the EVs this year. Oh, the EVs are going global. They're going into, and it's all about the subsidies. I'm like, it's not about the subsidy. Yeah, there's some subsidy there and it's a factor, but it ain't, no. The level of competition is so brutal. Like, if you're not afraid of competing with Chinese EV makers, you're not paying attention. It's scary. They're really good. We have them all over Thailand now. There's Chinese EVs everywhere.
It's scary. It's scary, especially for us, Jeffrey, as two German nationals, right? Looking back at our industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the whole industrial sector of Germany and that part of the world and auto is obviously a huge part of it. But, I remember 5 years ago, everyone's like, oh, Chinese can't make cars. I was like, give it 5 years, my friend. They're moving up the value chain, right? And watch out for planes. What trains are coming next? What about robots? That's next. Like, they're not stopping with laptops.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I mean, Thomas and myself, we've been to Huawei a couple of days ago in Shenzhen. Looked at everything they're doing. It's massive. It's like really scary if you see these companies, what they're doing, and the quality and the price and the speed. 100% agree.
Yeah, my joke, I've been to Huawei quite a few times. I know them pretty well. And I'm like, you think this is about some government-ish thing? No. The governments of the West are the only thing protecting them from Huawei. You make that a fair fight, no government involved in any way, shape, or form, Huawei cleans the field. Like, they're so well run and they're so good at what they do. Yeah, that's a very impressive company.
100%. Yeah, now last time you've been with us. We talked about the top industry trends 2023, and now sometime later, how have these trends evolved, and were there any surprises or developments you hadn't foreseen in that way?
I do mostly digital stuff, so that's a different answer to that question. So what's going on digital-ish? Which can be pure digital creatures, but it can also just be industries becoming more digitized over time. The big trend obviously is intelligence. That's the new one. Building intelligence capabilities on top of digital capabilities. And, that's kind of a US and a China story right now. Alibaba Cloud, Baidu Cloud's doing very well. Huawei's moving quick, but they're more doing infrastructure. So yeah, obviously putting intelligence into business capabilities is the new thing, but it's not moving that fast. It's, that's a slow burn. It takes a long time to build in enterprise capabilities. The faster side would be something more like what's going on in e-commerce coming out of China. That hits very quickly. Combining video with e-commerce is a big deal. TikTok Shop is just crushing it in Southeast Asia right now. 12 months ago wasn't a thing, and now they are just, Temu came out of nowhere and sort of put Amazon on its heels, right? So stuff in that sector, it's not as powerful as the LLMs and the foundation models, but it's happening faster. So when that happens, it keeps happening. Like Shein came out of nowhere, then Temu came out of nowhere, now TikTok Shop and TikTok Live, and suddenly the Indonesia government has to pass a new rule to basically protect their e-commerce companies from them, where they passed a new rule where you can't have video and e-commerce in the same app, which was just a defensive play. Because now we're talking about, let's say, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand. We're seeing industrial companies coming out of China into this region that are really, cross-border e-commerce has become a problem for the governments of this part of the world, because you can buy anything and get it shipped in now, and it's impacting a lot of their industrial companies. So they will limit that. Yeah, so that sector is definitely moving quick. And my argument has always been that, like, if it's on a smartphone, video, attention, messenger, payment, e-commerce, the epicenter is China, right? Everything's happening faster. And most of what we see in the West now is just 2 to 3 years behind what happened in China. That tends to be not 100% true, but like 80% true.
This sentence is really interesting. The epicenter is China. Last time we also talked about Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley was the epicenter like for the last 10, 15, 20 years. So how do you see the relationship between Silicon Valley and China right now in 2024? Is there any difference? Is it still like a big brother and small brother, or are they like competitors on the same level, or how would you describe this relationship?
Yeah, I mean, they're competitors on the same level, but they have different strengths. So China tends to be better at B2C. Consumers, anything tends to be faster, more innovative. They get to scale quicker. Silicon Valley tends to be better at enterprise, B2B. If it's got a hardware component, China is kind of changing the game, because when you build something in Silicon Valley, they don't manufacture. They do the software there, and then they have it built in Shenzhen. So robotics, cars, that tends to be better. Now, I think maybe the biggest difference is, so you could argue that China's better at B2C, China's better at anything with a hardware component. Robots, drones, scooters, anything smart home, anything where they put the word smart in front of it, China's probably the leader now. The difference is when they get to scale, when they get big, the US companies tend to be international. So it's not just the US market. Google's the US plus the world. The Chinese giants tend to be just China, which makes them somewhat smaller. It's not clear that that's going to be the same. Companies like Huawei are kind of killing it in Asia. TikTok became a global phenomenon. It used to be kind of a China versus a US international story. Now, maybe that's changing a little bit. I mean, the Chinese EV makers are absolutely going for the global markets, 100%. They don't want to be, the joke is, who's going to be the next Samsung? They all want to be the next Samsung. They want to be the Chinese company that went big everywhere, like Samsung out of Korea. But then it sort of gets a little political, In some cases, it starts to get political. But yeah, that's kind of the dynamic. Right now, most of the China giants are somewhat smaller than the Silicon Valley giants.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. And it's a very fast-moving market now also in your podcast, because you're a podcast host yourself. And in episode 221, you talked about Kuaishou and whether it's a profitable investment opportunity. Can you give us a brief answer to that?
Yeah, one of the areas I look at is people talk a lot about the Silicon Valley companies, right? And maybe they talk about the Chinese companies that are giants, the Alibabas, the Tencents. I like to kind of look one level down, like Kuaishou. People don't know Kuaishou, right? Everyone knows TikTok. People don't know Kuaishou. Kuaishou was before TikTok, right? They were the first mover in short video. They started out doing GIFs, and then they moved into short video in 2012. So they were ahead of TikTok, Douyin, Reels, all of them. And so I look for that second level that maybe people aren't familiar with and see maybe this is an opportunity. And, if you look at their numbers, monthly active users, they're in the 600 million range. They're just as big as TikTok in China. Now, TikTok's outside of China. So the big boys are 1 to 2 billion monthly active users, right? YouTube, TikTok. But, you can get pretty big by being a big company in China. You can get up to 600 million. However, they were never profitable. Douyin, the TikTok of China, has been a cash machine. They've been printing off cash for years. Kuaishou didn't. Now they've just hit operating break even in the last year. They've gone international a little bit. If you go to Brazil, you'll see billboards for Kwai, right? That's Kuaishou, because no one can pronounce show outside of China. So I like companies like that. HubSpot, Kuaishou, Rune Holdings, that second tier. Like, what's the other one I looked at recently? Bilibili, Xiaohongshu, Red, Pop Mart. If you go in San Francisco, you'll see Pop Mart stores. That's another sort of second-tier China innovator that's kind of rocking and rolling right now. Now, is it that was kind of the question, is this an investable opportunity? I don't give investment advice because I'm not managing a portfolio. So I'm more of a strategy guy who talks about certain aspects of the business. That's not the same thing as running a valuation. And so I don't give like, hey, look, I don't run professional money. So don't think of me that way. I basically am trying to get around the question of, if you're in the video business and everyone wants to be in the video business because that's how you get eyeballs, how big do you have to be to compete against the big boys? Is it all going to be Facebook and TikTok and Reels that command all the eyeballs? Or can you be second tier and get enough eyeballs that you're going to do well? I think Kuaishou is a viable long-term presence in China. I think they could be a viable long-term presence versus the big boys in select international markets. The big question is going to be, is this ultimately a game where everybody wants to be video, and so everyone's going to spend money like God because you have to capture the high ground of attention? If that's the case, well, they don't have the cash to compete with Tencent and ByteDance and Facebook. I mean, it might be that they're outgunned. But I think in China, they're pretty solid. Doesn't mean it's a good investment, but it means I think their competitive position looks pretty good to me. So I like questions like that where it's a little complicated. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish, not as an investment, but as a strategy and a business model in China. They get good traction in China. Their numbers look pretty solid.
Yeah, let's talk about TikTok a little bit, because TikTok is also, it's not very easy to explain because they are quite successful when it comes to content and traffic in Europe and in the US. They just get all the traffic from Instagram, from YouTube, and young people go to TikTok. So the question number one would be, what should European platforms learn from TikTok? And the second question is, it's not just about content, it's also about commerce, because in China, Douyin is successful in content and in commerce. But it's not that easy in Europe because they tried in the UK. I think people are not really buying on these platforms. And they want to do it in Germany next year, I guess. So what is your question number two? What is your opinion on that? Can they be as successful in commerce as they are in content?
Yeah, I kind of have two questions on this one. Like the first one is, what is going to be, this is all about retaining eyeballs, right? And it just turns out video is more powerful than JPEGs, and JPEGs Instagram is more powerful than text. Well, it turns out short video is like the king, right? It's super addictive. Okay, fine. So they came up with the new version of, Instagram was Coca-Cola, short videos Red Bull, right? Fine. And they have a very powerful business model against that. I mean, there's no difference between the TikTok business model and the YouTube and Instagram. It's all the same platform business model. So that's cool. The problem is, what gets people's attention changes really fast. Nobody talked about short video 5-10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago. So are we really going to be watching short videos 5 years from now? Or are we all going to have AR glasses on? Are we all going to be listening? We didn't talk about podcasts before. Podcasts are new. So if you're going to be in the attention business, one of the problems is consumer behavior and media formats change pretty quickly. I always like e-commerce better because, look, people are still going to buy socks in 10 years. I'm really confident about that. They're going to need milk. They're going to need socks. Are they going to be watching short videos in 10 years? On smartphones? I don't know. So there's more uncertainty. If you're going to be in the attention business, the world changes pretty quick. Now, I actually think video is very powerful. I don't think video is going anywhere. I mean, it really is quite powerful. So that's kind of question number one, is how do you stay at the top of the heap in terms of attention? The other question is it looks like video, social, and commerce are all kind of coming together as one experience. For consumers, we don't really care. I watch the video, I click buy, I chat with my friend. It's all one experience for us, right? It's not 3 different businesses like it used to be. So how that sort of merges together is an interesting question. Now, if I'm buying socks and milk, it doesn't really merge. I don't need to watch videos about milk. I don't care, right? So in that, I call that sort of the fight between the attention giants and the infrastructure giants. If you're selling milk and groceries, it's all about infrastructure. Do you have grocery stores? Can you get it delivered in 4 hours to my house? You know, that's Alibaba. They build warehouses and delivery people. It's all infrastructure. But if you're talking about fashion, well, it's not about infrastructure. It's about attention. Ooh, I like this video about this new peptide serum that makes the eye wrinkles go away, right? People consume a lot of content on fashion and beauty. Well, and if you have a bunch of warehouses and I can deliver in 2 hours, it's not really about that. So if you talk about the attention business, TikTok, fashion, I think that's where the e-commerce is going. So, you know, if you're going to be in e-commerce merging with social media, and then if you go into other businesses, let's say gaming, well, gaming has a lot of community. It's very social. Roblox is kind of like a community forum more than, so if you're talking about video games, it's not, I mean, it's a lot about the social media aspect, not the infrastructure, and kind of not the, so there's those 3 aspects. And when you take it apart, they kind of, you know, depending on the sector, it looks very different. Luxury is really interesting because luxury, people love, luxury brands are created by content, you know, Versace. But people don't like to buy luxury brands on their phone. They like to go to the really nice store in the mall. So yes, it's an attention business, but the e-commerce business doesn't work on a phone. Well, that's weird. So you need the store. Like, so you take it apart sector by sector. It's really kind of fun. Yeah, so I think about that a lot. And TikTok is, so your point was TikTok Shop and TikTok Live are doing well in things like fashion. But not everywhere. Like Chinese and Thai and Korean, you know, live streaming is a big deal. But they try it in England and it doesn't work. Like, people don't like it. You know, so that's the consumer behavior part. Is not, short video is pretty much popular everywhere. It's like golf in the NBA. It's pretty much every country in the world, like short video golf in the NBA. But live streaming is not. Live streaming is not popular in a lot of countries. They've tried it and people are like, don't like it. Like Korea, it's huge. I don't know why that is, but yeah, that consumer behavior piece is kind of strange.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what's happening once TikTok launches its e-commerce functions in Germany and in the rest of Europe, yeah, just as you said, UK and the US. But on your website, yeah, you analyzed the Ruhan holding in influencer-centric asset-light e-commerce business model. I mean, I also kind of in a similar business, not exactly identical. But could you explain to our listeners how this model works and what is interesting about it?
Yeah, I'm never sure how to pronounce it. Do you say Ruhan or do you say Run?
Well, that's what I always used to say. The former.
The Chinese would be Ruhan, right? But now,
exactly.
But the English spelling is Ruhnn.
Also weird, but it's run. Just say, let's say run.
Run, yeah. I mean, that's a Run is okay. It's like an agency for influencers. You know, it's like a Hollywood agency for influencers. So businesses can hire the agency and do that. I don't think that business itself is terribly interesting. What I think is interesting is the idea of someone doing something online, influencer, podcaster, video creation. You get some traction, and then you immediately put a foot into e-commerce. So this YouTuber is selling their own coffee, right? So it's this influencer-centric, asset-light e-commerce model. I think that's becoming, one, it's a hard business, but like we've all got a foot in that. And in some sense, it's a great equalizer because you can be just a regular person talking about makeup. And if you're knowledgeable, or maybe you have a PhD in chemistry, you can get following and then you can start selling third-party products, or you can start designing your own products. And I've worked with quite a few companies who've done just that. And, you know, it's a handful of people and suddenly they got $30 million worth of sales. So that's the great equalizer for anyone who wants to start a business. You don't have to be a Sephora to jump into the business and break in, right? The flip side is if your business is dependent on getting and maintaining attention, it's very hard. Most people, that's like saying I'm going to have a hit TV show. Well, one, most people don't get a hit TV show. And two, if you do get one, it lasts a couple years. Like most influencers don't last more than 2 to 3 years. So I talk with quite a few businesses about this who have sort of done this. And my argument is always, look, you've got some traction. You're on the hit TV show. Awesome. You've got to transition that into something that's not so attention dependent. Right? So let's put in some recurring revenue. Let's put in something where you've got a foundation of revenue and business coming in that doesn't depend 100% on you keeping eyeballs week after week. Because even if you're doing well, the platforms are going to change the rules on you. YouTube's going to change the algorithm. TikTok is going to change so it's a great, my argument has been like, look, to some extent, we all have to play this game now. If you're selling anything in this world, B2B, B2C, not everybody, but most of us have to be in the attention business to some degree. You're posting content, you're making podcasts, you're getting people, and then you're converting that to some type of business. Could be e-commerce, D2C, could be consulting. Maybe you're a lawyer, that's how you get your clients. We're all playing this game to somewhat. But you don't really want to be dependent on it, but it's pretty powerful. You know, you can take on Coca-Cola with Jeff Cola. If I get some traction and I'm, doing something clever. So it's a great skill, but yeah, I think Rune Holdings, the reason I like looking at it is because that whole business was a agency built around the fact that they got 3 to 4 really successful influencers that then moved into e-commerce, and they built that into an agency. And that's not a bad play, really. So yeah, asset-light, influencer-centric commerce. That's a cool thing to understand, I think. Here's one of the reasons I like it is corporations have a hard time competing with you. If I do videos sitting on the beach in the Philippines talking about e-commerce strategy, it's kind of hard for McKinsey. They can't do that. They're always going to come out a little bit corporate. Now, they're actually pretty personal, so that's interesting. But let's say you're a big beauty brand like Sephora or L'Oreal. You can't sit in a bar and talk beauty and be sort of yourself. They always have to be a bit formal, right? I would say a bit inauthentic, but one person who just loves beauty products and sits and talks about it from their dorm room is always going to be more authentic and personal than a corporation can ever be. So I always lean into that. Like I interviewed the chairman of Huawei, and they kind of said, would you like to come in and we'll video you interviewing the chairman of Huawei in the boardroom? And I'm like, I'm not McKinsey. I want to interview him in a bar. Can we meet down the street in a bar and have some drinks and talk? And they're like, no, we can't let him go to the bar. But he was actually cool with it. He's like, that's fun. We ended up doing hot pot. Let's go have hot pot and have some beers and talk about your life. That's a very non-corporate approach. And I did it on purpose. I don't want to sit in the boardroom in a suit. I want to go down and have a bunch of beers and have hot pot and talk. He actually thought that was a very cool idea. He's like, yeah, that was fun.
Disrupting the normal way it goes. Also, disrupting is a good keyword for the next question. Like the Chinese super apps were also very disrupting the app and the internet market in the US and the West, because we had one app for one function before, and then WeChat came, Meituan is coming now, and you can do everything on one app, from your utility bills to your flight bookings to chatting to dating to playing video games and to shopping, right? So do you think there will be a day where we also will have super apps, not just in China, but also in the West?
Yeah, the super app thing is weird. I almost think like we have the wrong vocabulary, because people talk about the WeChat app, the everything app. No one's ever been able to build that outside of China. Everyone's tried. Super app is another thing. Like the way I think about it is, okay, you're coming in with a digital first product. You're going to try and get traction somewhere. You're going to solve a specific problem for your customer. You're going to target. So that might be something like Bilibili, which is, it's kind of like YouTube, but it's very specific for anime, comics, and gaming. The content's all about that. And the people who watch it care about anime, comics, and gaming, right? So they built sort of a specialized YouTube, and that's how they broke in. That was their first move. Okay, but then you have a question. Should I take my core product where I'm getting traction and start to build out complementary services around that, right? Solve more of the same problem that my customers care about. And Bilibili did that. They started to say, we're gonna do live streaming, but only about gaming. And we're gonna launch an area where you can publish a comic book. So they sort of built complementary services around their core product. You know, I don't just want hot dogs from company A. I want hot dogs, buns, mustard, and ketchup. Right? But it's all one thing, right? I want to complete the whole solution. That would be one strategy. The super app strategy is different, which is I'm going to jump into something completely different that's unrelated to what I do. But I think my customer base cares about that. Even though they don't see me, you know, I'm not just going to do comics, gaming, anime. I'm also going to book hotel rooms. Well, that's weird. But a lot of successful companies like Alibaba, Tencent have realized if you have an ecosystem, if you have a network of customers, that is really what you do. It's not about the product. And if you have a powerful network like Facebook, you can pretty much put any product on top of that. So are you a network company or are you a product company? If you're a product company, then you're Bilibili and you should build out around your core interest, hot dog, mustard, ketchup. But if you're Facebook, if you're Tencent, they can jump into anything. We do hotel rooms now, Alibaba. What does hotel rooms have to do with e-commerce? Nothing. You know, Meituan, we do coffee and we do bike rentals and we do hotels and we do Gojek in Indonesia, you know, 21 different services. So that to me is the super app, when you make the jump out of something that would make sense from a classical strategy perspective into something it's like, look, we're the convenience store across the street. People come in every day, so we sell them whatever we want. I don't know if we're going to see that like outside of China. I almost think it's more of a cultural behavior. It's normal for companies to jump all over the place in Asia. In the US, people kind of stay in their lane. Uber does transportation and, you know, and Facebook does this, and they don't tend to jump around as much. Consumer behavior changes much faster in Asia than it does in the US or Europe. You can launch, I mean, if you're going to change people's behavior in the US, like my mom's on an iPhone, it's going to take a long time for her to switch. But you can put a QR code on anything in China and people will scan it and try it. Like, people are more experimental here. That's, I think that's cultural, but I'm not totally sure why that happens.
Yeah, And in your opinion, which trends will shape the world now in 2025?
I mean, we're talking tech stuff, right? Or China. It would be a different answer for China and a different answer for tech. Which one you want?
Well, give us both.
I think for China, the things I look for the stuff I think people don't see coming. And there's two things I think people don't see coming. Like 5 years ago, I would have said mobile payment. Mobile payment's going to happen. Because in China, 5 years ago, we had mobile payment and none of the rest of the world was doing it. And then we were watching short videos in China 4 years before they hit the West. Like I used to tell people in Brazil, like, look into this company, TikTok. And they're like, what's that? I'm like, you're going to find out, my friend, if you're in retail. I think smart products is going to be a China thing. I think China is so good at innovating in hardware and software at the same time that when it comes to making a better drone, it was not surprising that DJI took the market, right? It's not surprising to me that the EVs are coming. I think robotics, China is going to lead. So that would be one, like smart manufactured products. I think China is going to start exporting to the world more and more. The other one is probably smart cities. The other thing China is very good at, if they're good at digital and they're good at hardware, the other thing they're good at is infrastructure. They can build a highway faster than anybody. So it's not a stretch to redesign entire parts of cities and putting digital technology in all the roads and all the street signs and suddenly you're driving down the road and it tells you which roads to take based on real-time traffic monitoring, and it starts redirecting traffic, and suddenly the garbage trucks don't take the same route every day. They take specific routes based on which garbage cans are full because they have sensors in all the garbage cans. So they know which garbage cans are full and empty, right? We're going to see sort of smart, dynamic cities. And we're already seeing that in Hangzhou, in Shenzhen. I think that's another thing that China's very good at. And they're going to basically build turnkey solutions that they'll sell to Southeast Asia, they'll sell to Africa. You could go into Mexico. I used to ask this question a year ago in Mexico and Brazil. Like, would you be okay with a turnkey smart city being installed in Monterrey or somewhere? There's going to be cameras everywhere. There's going to be sensors everywhere. Everything you do outside your home is going to be tracked. But there'll be no more crime. And traffic will drop by 80%. And the pollution in the water, because you can put sensors in all the water supply, and electricity, there'll be no more brownouts. And everyone in the room was like, I'll sign up tomorrow. Because then you ask them, how many people have been robbed in the last year? And like half the hands go up. So this idea of turnkey smart cities, I think is probably going to happen. Now, will Europe adopt that? I don't know. No idea. Whenever I go to Germany or when I go there, the first question when I bring up smart cities is, what about privacy and surveillance? Like, I'm like, you from Germany? Yeah. Okay. Like, it's all in the time. Like, that's front of mind for a lot of people in that part of the world. Brazil, it's like, look, I don't want to be robbed again. It happens every 6 months I get robbed. I've been robbed, like gunpoint. Like, no. Put the cameras up, my friend. It's fine. Sorry. So that will be interesting.
Yeah, so very interesting. Yeah. So there's a lot to look forward in 2025, and smart cities is also, or cities, urbanization is also something you wrote about in the book. So for everyone who is interested, the English version is out on Amazon for 10 years already. Now the German version is out. Just look for the 1 Hour China book or Das 1 Hour China Buch in German, or just type Jeffrey Towson or my name or Damian's name and you will find it on Amazon. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for your insights. It was a pleasure to have you here again.
Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeffrey. See you soon.